Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Sector Unknown is out. I've been able to do a full playthrough. Yesterday, I dropped a review. If you haven't seen that yet, go ahead and check it out. Today, I'm going to walk you through a new player guide. This is a review of all the different systems that are in the game that maybe you had questions about or seemed a little bit unclear during your playthrough. Very excited about this. Hopefully, it'll help all of you have the most fun and best playthrough you possibly can when you experience the game. Now, I'm going to do some more content on this game and other CRPGs, of course. So if that interests you, be sure to go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future videos. With that, let's go ahead and get into it, starting with character creation. So these options up here are for the visual things you can do. There's a bunch of different ones, but there's nothing really to talk about here. So let's go ahead and go straight to the mechanics, starting with the conviction. Now, this is basically the reason why you start the game in prison. What were you doing that caused Star Frontier to go ahead and pick you up? So the first option is Industrial Saboteur, and this gives you a 20% bonus to the loot that you gain in the game. Personally, I don't think this is worth it. You will very quickly, if you have a high ranking in finance, which you absolutely should, money will be no issue, and therefore getting additional loot doesn't really do all that much for you. When you need to buy things, you'll have plenty of money to be able to do that. The other option gives you a +5 bonus to armor penetration. This is actually kind of nice. There are definitely enemies with a high amount of armor, and of course, being able to penetrate through that armor is going to allow you to deal more damage. But on the whole, combat is not really all that big of a deal. So personally, I think this is a rather weak conviction to take. But again, it might still work for you for role-playing purposes. Next up is Shipjacker. And in my opinion, this is the strongest conviction in the game. So first, you're going to get Hijack Maestro, which gives you an additional 2 skill points per level. This is a massive amount, makes a big difference in your playthrough. The faster you're gaining those skills, the better. It's going to make a major difference for you. So absolutely, this is great stuff. And then the other one gives you a 10% bonus to hit chance. I don't need to explain that. Being able to hit enemies more regularly is great, of course. Shipjacker is an extremely strong choice. Next is Claim Jumper, which is going to give you 20% additional resources. This is actually very useful because, at least in my playthrough, I did not have enough resources to max out everything in my planetary defense interface. And so if you are gaining significantly more resources over time, there's a much stronger chance that you'll be able to max out all of those rankings. However, I do think it's worth noting I didn't have to in order to get a high enough war table score to get good endings across the board for all of my different planets. So it's useful, but not really necessary. And then the other bonus is +5 armor, which makes you harder to hit, of course. This is going to be useful if you're playing as a melee-based character. If you're more so ranged, you're going to be in the back, you're going to get hit less often, and this doesn't really do all that much for you. Next up is Data Raider. So you're going to get a bonus to how much items sell for, and you're going to be able to purchase items for cheaper. But again, money is no object as long as you raise your finance stat. So I would say this is really not useful. And the other bonus is a +5% benefit to crit chance. That's a big deal. Those crits really destroy enemies. So the more often you could do them, the better. But there are a bunch of different ways to raise your crit chance. So frankly, I don't think it's worth doing it here. I would go ahead and skip this option. Next up is Narcotics Trafficker. So this gives you a +10 bonus to the skill point bonus you get when taking narcotics. So sometimes you might take a narcotic to get a +10 bonus in persuasion or a +10 bonus in larceny, and this will make that bonus +20 instead. In the beginning of the game, there are a couple of situations where it might be useful, but definitely by mid game, there's really no point in taking these. Between the 4 companions you have, you should be able to more than cover all of the different skills. Could be worth it if you're trying to do a solo run or maybe a run where it's just you and one other person. But otherwise, I would say this isn't really doing all that much for you. And then the other bonus is a +5 to evasion. Again, this is great if you're in a melee range. The more you can evade attacks, the better. But otherwise, I would say not all that awesome. Next up is Forger, and this is going to give you a 20% bonus to science points. Now, this is really nice. I didn't even come close to maxing out all of the different areas of the research table. And so being able to get those extra science points and be able to cover a lot of those different items a lot faster, there's definitely something to be said for that. So this is a really cool option. And then the other one is a 20% bonus to crit damage. Crit damage is already incredible. So to bump that damage up by an additional 20%, if you are diligent about getting your crit chance up to ensure you're taking advantage of this on a regular basis, it's definitely a big deal. So Forger is something worth considering. And then finally is the option that I chose for my first playthrough, Revolutionary. So the first option is going to give you +1 perk points per level. This is fantastic. Overall, I got, I think, around 42 levels in my game. So that's 42 additional perk points. Needless to say, that's a big deal and allowed me to choose a lot more perks. And some of the perks are very powerful in combat, and so it's nice to have more of them. And then the other option is a +1 action points. Again, great in combat. The more action points, the better. Allowed me to cycle through a lot of those buffs much faster. All the way around, Revolutionary is great. So in my personal opinion, again, Shipjacker is the best one, and then Revolutionary is a close second, especially if you're going to play on a harder difficulty and you're concerned about combat. Now, I'm not going to go over all the personalities because they all pretty much do the same thing. They're going to give you a +10 bonus in one skill and a +1 bonus in one attribute. And so which one you choose is really based around what sort of build you're going for. But I'll tell you that in my personal opinion, there's really no conversation to be had. The best two personality types are either Rational, which is going to give you a +1 intelligence and a +10 to science, or you could choose Methodical, which is going to give you a +1 to intelligence and a +10 to computers. And out of those two, I personally would go with Methodical, and you'll understand why when we go through the attributes and the skills. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and get started on that. So the first attribute I'm going to go ahead and cover is Intelligence, to explain to you why it's so dominant. Intelligence determines how many attribute points you get per level, how many skill points you get per level, and how much XP you get, so how fast you level up. Basically, it is the most important attribute in the entire game. And regardless of what type of build you're going for, in my strong personal opinion, right off the bat, you want to just max out intelligence all the way, because there's a big difference level wise between a character who has maxed out intelligence and a person who is not. Every point you don't have in intelligence is a point that is less XP that you're getting and less levels that you're getting. So you definitely want to avoid that. Intelligence is an area you're going to want to focus on. Now, starting from the top, we have Strength, and Strength is going to determine your health and your melee damage. So obviously, if you care about melee combat, this is an area you want to focus on. I was a ranged combatant and completely ignored this until late game when I just so happened to have some extra attribute points. And honestly, there was never a time where I regretted not doing that. As long as you stay in the back and you have somebody else who's serving as a melee character to kind of run up and take some of the heat, you should need to put points in this if you're operating at range. Next up is Coordination. So this is going to determine your hit chance and armor penetration. So no matter what type of character you're running, you're going to want at least some points in here to help ensure that you're actually able to hit enemies no doubt about it. Next is vision. This determines your initiative and range damage. So for my melee characters, I ignored this, and unfortunately that oftentimes meant that they were the very last to move in the rotation. But it's really going to benefit your range characters to ensure that they're dealing decent damage with every hit. Next up is speed, and this is going to determine how many action points do you have and how much evasion do you have. And this is very important for melee characters. One, because obviously being able to evade incoming attacks is going to be very helpful for them, but also they have to use action points in order to get within melee distance of enemies. So they need more action points than a ranged attacker who could just stand and take a pot shot. And so having that additional evasion and action points, very beneficial to you at melee. But even at range, you're probably going to want to put 1 or 2 points in here to give yourself more action points to play with. It's also worth noting that speed comes up in conversations when you're in the midst of a discussion with people where a fight is inevitable and it's multiple people, like let's say 3 or 4 or 5 combatants. Sometimes you'll get a speed option that says, hey, pull out your gun real quick and kill one of them before combat even kicks off. Usually you need around an 8 ranking in speed. You or somebody on your team needs an 8 ranking in speed in order to take advantage of that. So definitely something to keep in mind. There are a lot of kills that I missed out on because I didn't have anybody with a high enough speed to take advantage of those opportunities. Next up is aggression, and this is going to determine your crit chance and crit damage. Again, crit damage is incredible in this game. It will absolutely wipe out enemies. So you definitely want to have higher rankings here, but keep in mind, crafting will do a lot to increase your crit damage. So honestly, crit chance matters a whole lot more. And so you'll be able to gauge whether or not you need to put more points in here based on how crafting is going and what accessories you have access to. And with that, let's go ahead and move on to skills. Let's start with the combat options at the bottom, and then we'll move to the exploration options. So Sector Unknown, unfortunately, makes the same mistake I see in quite a few CRPGs, where they give you the option to be unarmed, but they make it so that it's clearly a significantly weaker option than choosing to have a weapon. Because even though the damage for your fist is going to scale as you increase your skill level in unarmed, you don't get any brass knuckles, you don't get any gloves, you don't get any weapons you can use in order to make this better. And the problem with that is when you choose a regular weapon, you can craft those weapons, and you can craft them in the way that they're going to get significantly higher bonuses in damage, crit chance, crit damage, things of that nature. There's no option to do that with unarmed. So even though it is viable, it's going to be significantly weaker than the other options. And so personally, I wouldn't go in that direction. As far as ranged options, it doesn't really matter what you choose. Pistols, rifles, and carbines, they're all pretty great. I personally prefer carbines and feel like I have a lot of good success with that. As far as knives and swords, again, both of them are viable. I prefer knives only because with them costing less AP to attack with, you can attack more times, and since those crit hits are so devastating, they, in my opinion, don't really deal less damage than swords when it all shakes out. So I prefer knives, but again, swords are completely viable and you can choose whatever you like here. There's no reason really to choose more than one combat skill. So once you've maxed out one that you like, you could just focus on the exploration options. All right. The other one I want to talk about before we get to the other exploration options is piloting. Piloting does not come up while you're just walking around and in conversations. However, there is ship combat, and whoever has the highest skill ranking in piloting is the one who's going to operate your ship during combat. So you can completely ignore ship combat if that is your preference. There's nothing in the main story or really any quest that requires you to get into combat with the ship. However, there are many opportunities to engage in ship combat, and there is a couple of sections of the war table that unlock due to specific ship combat sections. So you're going to miss that if you decide not to engage. Some of those ship battles are very difficult, especially if you have to face more than one combatant at a time. So if you're going to try to play as like a ship raider or someone who engages in ship combat on a regular basis, maxing out piloting is absolutely something that you're going to want to do. But again, it doesn't come up during exploration. So I would say it's on the back burner compared to many of the other skills that we're going to go over. One other back burner skill is luck. So luck is going to increase your chance of finding money, and it's going to increase your hit chance, crit chance, evasion chance. Basically, it's just going to make everything that you're doing, especially in regards to combat, better, but it never comes up in exploration. It never comes up as something that you can use in order to succeed on a particular skill check. It's just something that randomly kicks in. So I actually recommend that all of the characters on your team max out luck, but it's the last skill that they should max out. So basically, each one of them is going to have one combat skill and then probably around 3 or 4 exploration skills. And then once those are maxed out, you put your remaining 100 or so points into luck so that they can have the maximum combat effectiveness possible. All right, with that, let's go ahead and go through the remaining skills. First up is intimidation. And of course, during conversations, it's going to allow you to intimidate. There are a bunch of situations where persuasion is not an option. And the only way to succeed on a dialogue check is to use intimidation. And keep in mind, every check that you miss is XP that you have missed out on. And so that's part of the reason why I say over all of the team members you have, you want to make sure that all of these exploration skills are completely maxed out to ensure that you're getting all of the XP possible. Not to mention there's some really cool situations where having access to intimidation is really going to help you. Maxing out persuasion is more important. So I would say you don't necessarily need to prioritize intimidation at first. You could wait and make it like the second wave of skills that you max out, but it's definitely one you're going to want to focus on at some point. And next up, of course, is persuasion, which is definitely a skill that I would say your main character wants to be able to take and just take up front. Keep in mind, you always have companions with you, so it's not a situation where you have to worry about being separated from the group or not being able to access or needing to have a particular skill because none of your other companions are going to have it available. All of your companions are going to start from zero. So you could have one of your companions be the person who focuses on persuasion, but persuasion is useful right from the jump. And so that's why I would say you probably want it on your own character. Persuasion, I rank it ahead of intimidation because a lot of your role is about trying to convince these combating groups to work together. And I found that persuasion pops up more in those types of situations than intimidation or maybe some of the other options do. And so I definitely say you want to put a high priority on making sure this stays at high rankings. Next up is perception. So this is going to allow you to notice odd things in dialogue and sometimes hidden objects out in the field. Again, it's something that you're definitely going to want because it'll oftentimes unlock other dialogue options that you can then use to get your way, even if you don't necessarily have high skill rankings in other areas. I would say this is one that you want your companions to work on up front. So you don't necessarily need to have it, but one of your companions definitely try to get it to 100. Larceny is not only lock picking, but just is a measurement of your understanding of criminality in general. So if you're having a conversation with a group of people about black market prices, you could talk to them about that. About being a prisoner, you understand that. It will also, similar to how speed can be used to kill someone outright before the fight even starts. When you're in one-on-one situations with a person, sometimes a high larceny rating will allow you to kill a person outright without even having to go through combat. So all the way around, larceny is a great skill to have maxed out, and I would recommend you go ahead and put it on your character and make it with persuasion. Basically, persuasion and larceny are those two skills you want to focus on and get maxed out ASAP. Right from the beginning of the game, there's going to be a bunch of containers that you'll have to use a lock picking to get through. And again, if you're not able to open those containers, that's not just missed objects, that's also mixed XP. Next on the list is engineering. So engineering is a measurement of your knowledge of engineering and machinery. Comes up a bunch, definitely nice to have, not something that I personally would prioritize right up front. Probably something that your third or fourth party member that you bring on can go ahead and start working on. But like all of the others, you're definitely going to want to max this out over time. Next up, we have science, and the same deal. This is going to be your knowledge of scientific and abstract studies, and you're definitely going to want to have this maxed out. But I didn't feel like I really had to rush this. So some of the other ones I've mentioned, I feel like are more important, but science is one that you're going to want to get to at some point. And there are some exceptions to this that we'll talk about more when we get to the research table, where you might want to dibble and dabble into some skills so that you can get certain research levels, but we'll talk about that in just a bit. Next up is computers. I would actually recommend that you prioritize this. This should be one of the first few skills that your companions work on, because being able to hack into computers is also a great way to pick up more science points. So it ropes into a couple of different things, not just being able to clear the check. And so they are also multiple times in conversations, especially because you have a lot of dialogue with robots where computers is going to be very important. So absolutely, along with larceny and persuasion, I would say this is one you really want to prioritize. Next up is biology, and I would say it's really similar to science and engineering, where I don't feel like you really have to prioritize it up front, except there's a portion of the research table that specifically relates to biology that I think could really help you and might motivate you to speed up getting more ranks in here. So we'll talk about that again a little bit later in the video. And then finally, we have finances. I consider finances one of those primary skills, along with computers, larceny, and persuasion, that you want your team focusing on ASAP. There are a lot of opportunities to dig into the finances of the people that you're dealing with, and it's going to open up more dialogue options for you, and it's going to help to ensure you always have enough money to do whatever it is you want to do. Just having a high finance allows you to have way more money than you need just by selling your junk. You don't even need to sell the actual weapons and armor that you come in contact with. You can give those away to your planets to up your war score, and just selling your junk will be enough to keep you afloat with everything that you want to do. So absolutely, finances is a very important skill. You want to get that maxed out. All right, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start talking about your hubs. So first, you have this central command area, and this allows you to get into your war score terminal. So this allows you to see your war score, which tracks how prepared you are to eventually face a star frontier. And up here, you'll see how many war score points are you getting from the missions that you've completed, from the planets that you have pacified, from the companions that you have brought in, from the support personnel that you have brought on, how many other planets have you claimed. So these are planets that are not necessarily part of the main quest, but you've mined them, scanned them, and so now they're basically considered to be part of your overall crew. And then these are the they also track the stockpile, so you can contribute your own weapons and armor that you pick up that maybe you no longer use. There's a chest towards the beginning. In fact, I'll show you this now. This chest right over here, the game, I don't feel like the game actually tells you this, but this is stockpile. So you can go ahead and put weapons and armor that you don't want in here and close, and then it'll say, hey, do you want to close the stockpile? All weapons you placed inside will be consumed and converted into war score. And so this is how you contribute your own weapons to the defense, essentially. Now, if we go ahead and go back to the war score terminal, you'll see there's all these question marks here. And these are things that you can do throughout the story to unlock and give yourself more resources. So maybe you were able to conquer a particular, like a power plant, right? So it'll pop up here and say, hey, such and such a power plant has now been pacified by you. So it's contributing to your war score. Or you're able to secure a relationship with a particular group that'll also contribute to this war score. So I didn't unlock all of these because there was one group where I just killed the leader instead of working with them. So it's definitely possible that you'll do all of the content, but then how you did the content will contribute to whether or not you actually unlock these. And then down here, it lists the planets that you have been able to pacify out to this point. So there are 5 main story planets that you can pacify over the course of the game. And then finally, you have characters you can recruit. So there are really specialists who will be able to aid you in a certain area. So you can see I've already found a metallurgy expert, and he gives me a 5% bonus to my crafting components. At some point, I found a chronicler, and I think he gave me a 10% bonus to how much XP I gain. These people are all across the galaxy. You never know when you're going to run into them. So it's important that you just talk to everybody, and then usually they'll either have a quest for them to jump on, or in some cases, you could just talk with them and they're looking for an out. So they'll just join up with you without a whole lot of conversation. Now, if you head over to the right, there is the Planet Defense Terminal. And so this tracks your rating for all of the different aspects of being able to defend your planet. And if you want to upgrade it, if you highlight over that button, you'll see that there are specific resources required in order to upgrade. And so this is where that conviction that we looked at that increases your resources by 20%, this is where it comes into play. It would make it much, much easier for you to max out these planet defenses. I did not come close to maxing out all of the planet defenses across all 5 planets. So that 20% definitely would have helped me. But again, I got good endings for all the planets because I had I did everything I could, and I still had a higher war score due to my contributions in a bunch of different areas. So this is just something for you to consider. All right, now next up in this section of your hub, you're going to be able to see your research terminal. So this is a list of different aspects of what you can do with your mining hub, and it's all related to your skills as well. So your skills are basically going to gate lock different options that we have here. And for each option, not only is it gate locked behind a different skill, but then there's also going to be a minimum amount of science points you have to have available in order to purchase these options as well. So going through the list, each of these tabs is going to start with an option related to your war score. And so for biology, it's going to increase your food and medical supplies of the planet for the war score if you select this. So basically what it's going to do is for all of the different planets, it's going to give a bonus to their war score in this particular area, making it much easier for you to max out this aspect of what you need on that particular planet. So for computers, it will allow you to boost how many robots do these planets have available. For engineering, it'll increase their defenses and fortifications. And then for finance, it's going to increase their stocks. For science, it's going to increase their ion cannons. And then for piloting, it's going to increase how how many mines these planets have around them. So those are all the different categories that were in that planetary defense terminal we saw just a bit ago. So you can invest in these if you want higher rankings in there. And again, I was not able to max out those rankings. So I would say that's definitely a good thought if you have bandwidth after investing in some of the other areas that we're going to cover. All right, next up, when we're looking at the biology tab, you have damage increase for companion humans. So I mentioned before that I consider some skills to be ones that from an exploration standpoint, you don't really need to focus on, but you might want to focus on it more for the research terminal. Biology is on that list because I definitely recommend for companions, you focus on humans instead of robots. And the reason for that is when you look at robots, they cannot wear a helmet, they cannot use armor plating, and they cannot wear accessories. And they can only use carbine weapons, whereas humans can use whatever weapon you want them to, and they can also equip all of these things as well. And the only now the trade-off is robots can automatically repair themselves after combat. I don't consider that to be a particularly big deal because there are plenty of medical injections you can get to heal your crew after you get through with combat. And at some point, as long as you built yourself up right, combat is really not a big deal anyway. And there's nothing done for most robots to make up for the fact that they can't use armor plating. Most of them sit at 20 armor, whereas your human companions, once they get better equipment, can easily dwarf that, especially depending on what perks they have taken. Now, the only exception is one robot companion who I think it's like a monster score. Like I think he had maybe 50. And so in that particular case, that's the same one who can fight unarmed. So in that particular case, it might make a little bit more sense to use him, but on the whole, I would say stick with the humans and you're going to have a much better time in combat. And so if you're going to do that, increasing their damage makes a whole lot of sense. So you might prioritize raising biology so you can get these research terminal options much faster. There's also a defensive option that increases the health of humans that are your companions as well. So again, worth considering. Psychological analysis is going to boost the damage over time effects that you all use. I never found this to be all that useful because I didn't use DOTs on a regular basis, but again, your mileage may vary. Next up is injector manufacturing. So this allows you to be able to basically manufacture drugs of different types. Now, you definitely want to take the first one because it allows you to manufacture gene flux, which is equivalent to med kits in this game. And so being able to create your own is going to be very beneficial. Whether or not you want the other ones depends on how you feel about their bonuses. To be honest with you, I never messed around with the drugs available in the game because I never felt like combat really pushed me to do that, but I did play on normal. So if you're playing on harder difficulties, you might find one of these to be beneficial to you. Note that even though it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you don't have to go in order. So if you decide you don't care about what 2 and 3 provides, but the drugs that 4 provides really helps you, then you could just go straight to 4 and select that. All right, next, let's circle back to computers. So research heuristics reduces the science points required for research. I highly recommend that you prioritize this up front. And again, I believe you should prioritize computers up front. So that should make it even easier for you to max this out very, very early and really help your science points to stretch. Next up, you can also create different terminals. So first one is Bounty Terminal, and I definitely recommend you pick this up. It's going to tell you who throughout the galaxy has a bounty on them. And the interesting thing about that is it's not just a list of bandits. There's a lot of regular people throughout the galaxy who have bounties on their heads, and you would never know it just talking with them. And so you could end up doing a whole quest line with a person, coming back to your base, opening up this or creating this terminal and then finding out, oh, this person has a bounty on them, then coming back and talking with them and having a conversation like, hey, I know who you really are. I know what you've done, and making a decision about whether or not you want to get the bounty that's on them. Very cool stuff. Next up is weapon station. And this is going to allow you to craft weapons. Absolutely. You want to do this. It's a big, big deal, because what weapons do, it doesn't allow you to create a different weapon. So you're going to be able to create a weapon of the same type. But what it does is randomly roll all of the different numerical factors you see on this gun. And so if you had crafted this annihilator, you might be able to get one that has a 30% crit chance, 120% crit damage, 5 armor penetration. You get the idea. All of those stats could be significantly higher based on how well you're able to craft it. Now, sometimes you have to craft the same weapon over and over again to get a version that's really, really cool and that really does what you want, but it's absolutely worth investing into so you can get more powerful options. Next up is the narcotic station. So if you want to be able to produce narcotics, it's not enough to just select the specific drug and biology. You also have to have the narcotic station. And so you would purchase that here. And then there's actually a terminal here up front where you would actually go in and create the terminal. So basically you unlock the terminal here, then you create the terminal here, and then you still have to go to this research terminal in order to be able to select the specific drugs you want to be able to produce. And then finally, we have the injector station. Same deal here. You unlock the blueprint basically to create the injector terminal here. Then you got to go back to the front to create that terminal. And then you still have to go into biology and unlock the ability to produce whatever injectors it is you want to be able to create. And then next up is lethal programming. So this is going to increase the damage for your companion robots. Defensive programming is going to increase their health. Again, personally, I recommend that you do not use the robot companions unless you have to for their quest. And so I would recommend skipping all of this. Next up is engineering. And if we go to the top, first up is weapons experimentation. This is going to increase the success chances of weapon crafting. Absolutely. You want all of these. Again, the weapons, what stats they come out with is completely random. So the higher this stuff is, the better stuff you're going to be able to create. And then after that, you get a bunch of blueprints for different weapons that you create, whether they be pistols or carbines or rifles or swords. And depending on what weapons your character uses, you absolutely are going to want to pick those up. Next up is finances. So artisanry is going to allow you to have better price for crafted items. No, you don't want to bother with this. Again, just having a high finances score, which you would need to get ranks in here anyway, is going to be more than enough to get all the money that you need. Next up is financial acumen. Similar deal. No, you don't need that. You already have enough money. Same with junk valuation. Again, you don't need that. Money is not an issue as long as your finance skill is high. And again, increases credit amounts from loot. Don't need that at all, especially when you get to the point that your entire team has maxed out luck. You're going to be picking up money left and right. No need to invest in really any of this. Next up is science, and we've got science extraction. Increase science points from computers. You're going to be maxing out computers. You're going to be using computers a lot. You want all the science points you could possibly get. So absolutely, you want to max these all the way. And then this is going to allow you to make narcotics similar to what we talked about with injectors. So even though it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you do not have to get them in order, so you can look through them and decide if there's one in particular that produces the type of narcotics that you're interested in using. And then last on the list is piloting. So zero gravity scavenging is going to increase the amount of resources that you get from destroyed ships. Whether or not this is worth it to you depends on whether or not you're destroying a lot of ships. If you're getting into a lot of ship combat, absolutely this could be worth it. Me personally, I didn't, so I completely ignore this. Next up is hull reinforcements, which is going to increase the health of your ship by 50. Are you getting into a lot of ship combat? Pick this up. If not, irrelevant. Same with weapons modding, which is going to increase the damage of your ship. If you want to participate a lot in ship combat, you're definitely going to want this. If not, it's completely irrelevant. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about perks. There's actually three categories of perks: damage, mitigation, and tactical. We'll go ahead and start with damage. So, first up is hazardous boost. This is going to increase your crit damage by 20% and your base damage by 10% for the entire duration of combat. Now, when it says combat duration like that, this means that it's a buff that you have to manually activate. Usually, you're going to have to spend one action point to do so, but it's well worth it. Combat can sometimes be 3, 4, even 5 rounds. And so activating a buff for a small cost and then having it the entire combat definitely makes sense. Highly recommend you pick this up. Next is scaling aggression. You're going to get a +1 bonus to damage per level up to 10. Again, I got up to I think around level 42, and so you'll definitely be able to max this out, and +10 to damage is nothing to scoff at. Next up is a +20 bonus to initiative. All your characters definitely want to take this. The quicker you can act, the quicker you can take out enemies. Being able to take out foes before they even get a chance to act is going to be very, very beneficial. Next up is Dog of War, +2 bonus to action points. Absolutely, you're going to want this. So this entire first row of damage, all of your characters are definitely going to want to take it. Next up is Focus Onslaught, 5% bonus to hit chance and a 10% bonus to damage against those enemies for the entire duration of combat. Again, no question, you'll want to take this. Next up is Titan Challenger. You're going to get a 30% bonus to damage versus opponents who have 500 or more health. This is not going to be useful until late mid game when you start facing those types of enemies regularly, but once you see them start to pop up, absolutely, your entire team should be taking this. Next up is Rapid Dominance, +10% damage if initiative is 30 or more. So the answer to this is obvious. If your initiative is more than 30, you want to take it, and you can easily see what your initiative is here. So your ranged characters absolutely are all going to take this because they're going to be taking vision to increase their range damage, and that's also automatically going to increase their initiative. Your melee characters are probably going to have much lower initiative, and so consequently they might end up skipping this. Next up is Armor Shredder, +5 bonus to armor penetration. That's obviously useful to everybody. Everybody doesn't necessarily need to take this, but if you're low on armor penetration, it's something to consider. Next up is Lethal Boost, 10% bonus to crit chance and 10% bonus to damage against those enemies for the entire duration of combat. Once again, no question, this is great stuff. Next up is a 20% bonus to damage with ranged weapons. If you're using ranged weapons, why wouldn't you take this? Same thing with bladed weapons. If you're using those, you'll take this. And then we have Weapons Master, which is a 10% bonus to damage with all weapons. This buff stacks with this one and this one. So regardless of which weapon type you use, you're going to take one of these and then you're going to stack this on top of it and get a 30% bonus to damage all the way around. Great stuff. Next is Last Stand. You're going to get a +100 bonus to damage, but you're going to reduce your health to 20. Personally, I don't think that makes sense. Health to 20 means that one hit and you'll be knocked out. It's very rare the situations where that's really going to be worth it. Maybe if you're on the highest difficulty and really need to make sure you can use the Last Stand to take out one enemy, perhaps is worth in that situation, but I would say skip this. Next is Crit Killer. You'll get 50% more damage if the enemy has 40% or more crit chance. As far as I can tell, there's no way to see what the crit chance is of the enemies you're going up against. So I skipped this because I have no idea how applicable it is to the combat scenarios you get into. Next up is Wounded Pride, 5% more damage for every 5% of health missing. I didn't take this. It could be useful on your melee characters because again, they're going to get hit a lot more, and even when they get grazed, they're going to take more health points. But honestly, there's a lot of combat scenarios where if you have great initiative and deal great damage, you can wipe out all the enemies on the board before they even get a chance to act. So I would say skip this. Next up is Overkill, +10 damage for each team kill. This is somewhat worth it. I would say more so late game, because early game, a lot of fights are only 2 or 3 characters. But later in the game, you're going to get squads of 4, 5, maybe even 6 characters that you're going up against. And so getting a +10 damage for each one could definitely be beneficial. All right, next up is mitigation. First up, we have a +5 bonus to armor. This is useful for your melee characters. I would say it's not all that useful for your ranged characters. Next up is a +1 health per level up to 20. Now, we're going to see a lot of perks like this that will increase your health by a small amount, usually around 10 to 20. Personally, I don't think it's worth it. Even with a ranged character like Commander Shepard, I've got 115 health. Using 2 perk points to get an extra 20 health isn't really doing all that much for me. And if I had maxed out strength, it would be an even wilder situation. In fact, I think Cheetah has maxed out strength. Cheetah has 7 on strength. She's got 215 health points. Why is she spending a perk point to add 20? So it's basically a situation where there's a lot of little bug bites like this. And if you wanted to spend all your perk points on these health bonuses, you could add another, 100, 150 to your health, and all together it could be sizable. But personally, I just don't think it's worth it, and I would skip these. Next up is Lucky Dodger, +5% bonus to evasion. If you have a high evasion, which most likely being a melee character, you're going to focus a little bit more on speed, so your evasion is going to be a little bit higher. Then it makes sense to stack more on top of it. But if you're completely ignoring evasion, then obviously it's not going to do much for you. Next up, hard to kill. Like I said before, +10 health. Personally, I don't think it's worth it. Next is stand fast, +20 armor for the duration of combat. Absolutely, if you're a melee character, you're going to want to pick this up. Next is evasive action, 50% less damage from grazing hits. I would say really all of your characters should go ahead and pick this up, because all of your characters are going to be putting on armor plating, and so plenty of the hits that come against them are going to graze, and being able to mitigate even more of that damage could absolutely be worth it. Next is pin cushion, +30% increased effects from injectors. All of your team is going to want to take this because it's going to significantly increase the effectiveness of your med kits, making sure they heal for a lot more. Next up is Dust Head, which is going to increase the combat stats you get from narcotics by 30%, along with increasing their skill boost by 10. If you like using narcotics, this is absolutely something you'll want. I didn't. In fact, I completely ignored them, so I skipped this. Next up, we have Close Call. Next attack against is a grazing hit. I personally don't like this because ranged characters probably aren't going to want this, and melee characters, you're going to get hit a whole lot every round. So being able to make one hit a grazing hit isn't really doing all that much. Next up is nanocycle healing, +10% chance of regaining 20 health each turn. Again, 20 health is just not all that much, and especially only getting it once per turn, it's not worth spending a perk point on this. Next up is Broad Guard, 5% less melee damage done against you. Melee characters, absolutely you're going to want this. Next is Layered Resilience, 5% less range damage against you. Absolutely, again, melee characters, you're going to want this. Ranged characters could consider this, but again, you're not really going to get the bulk of the heat, so it's not really worth it. I skipped it, and I never regretted that. Next is Staunch Surge. You get +100 health, but you're going to have a 10% reduced chance to critically hit. Personally, I don't think it's worth it. Crit chances are amazing. Crits do a lot of damage, so I would skip this. Next is Headbanger, +20 health if you have a helmet equipped. It's very easy, very shortly into the game to consistently have a helmet on, so you could easily get this buff, but again, that's 8 freaking perk points. Is it worth 20 health when just your strength alone at level 5 is giving you 215 health? So your health is going to get astronomical as you go on. Again, I just don't think it is. Next is Colossus, +20 health if equipped with chest armor. Again, it's very easy to have chest armor, so you can easily trigger this, but is it worth the perk points? I don't think so. Next is Cautious Exposure, 50% less crit damage against you. I personally would say all of your characters should take this. The one disadvantage of not bumping up strength at all is that if an enemy gets a really, really good crit on you, they can one-shot one-shot you. And this completely mitigates that, at least on normal. So I would recommend picking it up. All right, the final category is tactical. And the first option is Rally Call. +1 action points for combat duration. So again, this is a buff that you activate during combat. 100% you should take this. More action points, the better. Next is Strength in Numbers. +2% damage for every team member. You're going to have 4 team members. So that's an 8% bonus to damage. Absolutely. Why not? Favorite odds. Same thing, except it's to mitigate damage against you. I personally would say that everybody on the team should just go ahead and take this. Why wouldn't you want 8% less damage coming your way for only 2 perk points? Next is +1 penetration for every team member. Again, why wouldn't you take this? Extra armor penetration is awesome. Nano Surge, +20 health restored for team per team kill. Again, even at the highest ranks, you're only going to be facing teams of like 5 people. So getting an additional 80 health before you finally kill the last guy, it's just not doing all that much. I personally would skip this. Next is Force Multiplier, +5% damage if you have 15 or more armor penetration. So you can easily see how much, armor, here we go, how much armor penetration you have. And so all of your characters will probably get to the point that they have 15 at some point. And when they do, why not go ahead and pick up that extra damage? 5%, why not? Next up is Bulwark Bond, +20 health if you have 14% or more evasion. Again, your melee characters will be able to get this, but is it worth it? I would say no. Next is Bloodlust. You would get 30% crit damage if you have 50 or more initiative. Your range characters should absolutely be able to get over that hurdle, and they're going to want to pick this up. Next is Roll the Dice. 10% evasion for combat duration. Melee characters, no question, they're going to want this. Really, really nice boost. Clanker Record, +20% damage versus robots. This is something to consider. You do face quite a few robots throughout the game. I skipped it. I don't feel like there's quite enough robots for this to really be worth it, but it's something to consider. What's definitely worth picking up is 20% damage versus humans. Humans are the most powerful and probably dangerous enemy in the game. Like when I talk about an enemy able to knock you out with one well-placed crit, it's really humans who can do that. Now there's also beasts, and I would put them at second place. Like I don't think the robot one is worth getting, but definitely the beast one. They're beasts who will poison you, and so it's going to do that damage over time on top of the actual physical damage that they're doing, and that can be really, really nasty. So having an additional 20% damage against them is something to consider if you have 6 points to use, but absolutely no question you want everybody on your squad to get that damage bonus versus humans. And then for the last row, Nano Swarm, +30 health restored for the entire team. So this is something that you manually select, and it's something you can select every round, and potentially you can have your entire team with this option, and then each one uses it on their turn, which could be 120 additional health in one round. So that's something absolutely to consider. It's an interesting option to heal up. Next is Underdog, 20% less damage done against you if outnumbered. This is not worth it unless you're trying to do a solo run or a run where it's just you and one other person, because most times there's only going to be like 3 or 4 enemies at most until you get closer to end game. So there's not a whole lot of situations in which you're completely outnumbered. Same with outgun. You're going to get a 20% bonus to damage if outnumbered. Again, that's not going to happen very often. And then finally, Kill Competitor. You're going to get a +10% bonus to damage for each team kill. And with that, let's go ahead and talk about combat. But before we do, let me make a little note that you might not have already been aware of. When you're looking at a companion's character sheet, if you go to the gear icon up here, it'll let you know, hey, control this companion during combat. So you can select this and it'll allow you to control the companion during combat as opposed to just letting the AI do whatever it is it's going to do. I don't think the game ever tells you that this option is available, but it definitely is, and it's something that you might want to go ahead and consider using. All right, so now we're in a combat scenario. So the green area is where I could potentially move, and it's also the range for where I could shoot. So if you look down at the bottom, the last button, it allows me to end my turn. Then I have Devil's Pack, which allows me to heal toxic damage, but you have to actually have the injector. So you must have looted it, bought it, or you could produce it if you've created that terminal back at your base. Caroxin allows you to heal acid damage. Then we have compound G9, which allows you to heal bleeding damage. So sometimes you want to track this because different enemies will deal different types of damage, and even if the actual direct hit doesn't do all that much, sometimes the damage over time is brutal, and so you need to keep track of that. The Gene Flux is going to heal you, but notice it costs 3 action points to use it, so it's not cheap at all. And then I also had picked up the Nano Swarm, so it's going to heal my entire team by 30 points, and it only costs 1 action point to use, so very, very inexpensive. Now, with that, Rally Call, I mentioned, gives you 1 additional action point, and it costs 0 action points for you to activate it. So absolutely, you want this. We'll click that. It's going to give me 1 action point, and then it's going to list it here so that I know it's already been activated. Then I also have Focused Onslaught, which is going to increase my hit chance by 5% and my damage by 10% for the entire duration of combat. It costs 1 action point to use it. I'm going to go ahead and activate that, and again, there's a little symbol there to let me know that it's on. Once again, 1 more action point, 20% bonus to crit damage, and a 10% bonus to damage against enemies. I'll hit that, and that will go up there as well. So these bonuses, these buffs that we get from perks, they all stack. You can have all of them on at the same time. Then the rest of these are related to the exact weapon that I have. So depending on if you have a rifle, a carbine, a knife, or a sword, or even unarmed, you'll see different options here. So I've got 4 of them. I've got an Armor Wrecker, which will reduce the target's armor by 50%. I've got Aim Shot, which will give me an 100% hit chance, but it will do no crit damage. And I've got Pinpoint Strike, which will reduce my hit chance by 20%, but I've got an 100% chance to crit if it hits. And then finally, I've got Charge Blast, which will give me a 20% bonus to damage. And all of them only cost 1 action point to use, but these are not stackable. So you have to choose which buff you want to activate for a particular attack, and all of them will have a cooldown. And I don't think the cooldown is the same for all of them, but unfortunately it also doesn't list the cooldown. So you kind of just have to remember what it is if that's important information to you. So I like kicking things off with the armor reducer. So we'll go ahead and click that, and you'll see it'll show up here. And then I can go ahead and click on the enemy that I want to do it on. So you'll see that it has the name of the enemy, KB9336, and it will tell you the level. So it's level 15. So notice there's only 2 of them, but they're level 15 while my character is level 12. And in fact, I've got 1 character who's level 8, 1 character level 9, and that's pretty consistent, where they'll have significantly less numbers, but the levels of your enemies will oftentimes be much higher than your level. Now you can also see how much health they have. So they have 330, and then you can see I have a 67% chance to hit this enemy, and it costs 5 action points for me to be able to attack. So I only have 7 action points here, and you can see the damage that I can deal along with how much health I have and how much armor I have and my level. So I'll go ahead and try to hit this particular enemy. And you see I grazed him for 25 damage. Now I can't hit again. If I try, it'll say not enough action points, but I do have 2 action points left. So I could move if I wanted to, or what I could also do is set up the buff that I want to use when I can attack again. So I'm going to go ahead and activate Charge Blast, and then that's going to be available the next time my turn comes around. Now, I did not activate the option to be able to control what my companions do, and so you'll see they're operating on their own. But if I had decided to leave on to turn on the option to control them myself, I would have had similar options to what we've already went through. So the companions did what they could. The companions, in case you're wondering, are usually quite effective in combat, even if you use the AI. The only disadvantage, or at least one of the disadvantages, is you can't focus fire on one enemy. They won't use tactics to say, hey, this enemy has the least amount of health, or this enemy has been debugged, so let's all focus on that one. So if you really want to drill down and fight in a more tactical way, then you're going to want to turn on the ability to control them yourself. All right, I still have the charge blast available, so let's go ahead and try that. And that did 614 damage with a crit hit. So you can see, even if that character had been at full health, I still would have completely took them out. So crit hits are a big deal in this game. And you can see that Armor Wrecker, I think Armor Wrecker had a 4-turn cooldown, actually. That's now 3. And I just used this. This is now a 3-turn cooldown. So next up, we'll use Pinpoint Strike to get us that 100% cooldown chance. And you'll see my ability to hit this enemy has been reduced to 42%. And actually, I don't even have enough action points in order to be able to hit them, because I only had 4. So I really should have just done a regular attack and activated this buff on the next turn, but it is what it is. So Stringfellow's using a sword, and then I have Cheetah using her knives, and you saw they went on ahead and took care of that particular enemy. And there is somewhat of a log, and you can see it's a little faded out here. I don't know what I could do to make it more prevalent, but you can see that you can track some of the turns and how much damage they've done and what abilities your companions used and things of that nature in the log. But it's not like a Pathfinder where you could go in and click like, okay, this hit, well, what was the roll and all that kind of stuff. You can't do that, but there is a little bit of information there if you want to look through it. And that's it. That is the entire new player guide. Hopefully that gave you all the information you needed, but of course, if it didn't, leave a comment down below with your questions. I'd be happy to answer them. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe, hit that bell, hit that like button. Let me know that you enjoyed the content. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.